All right, folks, today we're going to be making fletchings out of wild turkey feathers, so stick around. All right, so making these fletchings is pretty easy and you really don't need very many tools to do it. And I'm actually going to show you a couple of different ways to do this. I primarily use a tabletop belt sander for making my fletchings, but if you don't have one of those, I'm also going to show you how to use a rasp or just a mill file to make these things. Now, to make your fletchings, the first thing that we're going to have to do, obviously, is get our hands on some feathers. If you're a turkey hunter, that should be pretty easy for you. If you're not a turkey hunter, oftentimes all you have to do is find a turkey hunter and ask for their wings, because most people really don't have any use for these things and they throw them away. So it should be, if you're in an area of the country where there are turkeys, it should be pretty easy to get your hands on some. All right, so once we've got our hands on some turkey wings, we need to pick out the feathers that we're going to use. Now, a turkey wing is broken into two different sections. There's the primaries, which is that first section, which if my arm was a turkey wing, that would be all the feathers that are coming off of this part. The secondaries would be coming off down here, so that's kind of the back part of the wing. Either one of these sections will work, but personally I prefer the primaries because they're a little bit stiffer. They tend to hold up to the weather a little bit better, and in my opinion, they just make a better fletching. Now, with that said, these secondaries like this, they'll work just fine. So if this is all you can get your hands on, don't worry about it. The second thing you're going to need to do is just look through the feathers that you have and pick out the ones that don't have any kind of damage or anything like that. Sometimes when you get feathers from hunters, you'll have damage from the shot itself, and this feather here is a great example. We had a shot go right through the quill here, which kind of just broke this quill in half. You can still get one good fletching out of this, but you're not going to want to use this area that's damaged, so we're just going to go ahead and cut that off. So for the longer feathers, the primaries, like this one right here, you're going to be able to get two good fletchings out of it. Some of the shorter ones, like this one, you'll probably only get one fletching right out of the middle of this, unless you're making just really short fletchings. So once we have our feathers picked out, we're just going to go ahead and take our razor knife, and it's going to help if you have a new razor, a really sharp razor. And we're going to go ahead and split these things right up the middle of the quill. So that you have a feather like this. So one problem that you might run into when you're doing this is your split might try to run off to the left or to the right, and it might not want to stay right in the middle of the quill. If it does that, you just move move your pulling point left or right, or change the pitch of the knife to keep everything. See, that one kind of ran off to the bottom side, so I'm going to just restart. Keep it right in the middle. So once you have your feathers split like this, you're going to notice that the quill is really fat down here at the base end, and it just kind of tapers down to nothing out here towards the end of the feather. And so personally, I like to back up until I've got a little over a 1/16 of an inch minimum width on this quill. And I'll go ahead and just trim right there. Throw that away. Now on this board that I've got here, I've got a little stop here. And then I've got some marks at 4, 4.5, 5, 5.5 for different length fletchings. And you can just take the quill, butt it right up to that little stop, and trim your fletching to whatever you want it. I'm making 4-inch fletchings today, so I'm just going to put it on the 4-inch mark and cut it just like that. And then if you've got a feather long enough, you can do it again. I'm going to go ahead and go through the rest of these fletchings, split them, trim them, and then we're going to start grinding. Now, one of the things that you want to watch when you're trimming these things to length is that you cut just the quill, because if you go and cut the whole feather, the back end of the next feather is going to be cut flat. It's helpful if you take your razor knife and just stick it into the board so it's just holding itself there, and then you just pull the fletching. Turn this a little bit this way so you can see it. All right, so we've got all our fletchings trimmed to length and we're ready to start grinding these things down. Now, one thing that I forgot to mention when I was talking about picking out feathers is to make sure that all of your fletchings are coming from either the left or the right wing. You don't want to be mixing them. If you just get a pile of feathers and they're not attached to the wing, the way that you'll determine whether or not it's a left or a right wing is you can take these feathers, and this one right here that I have in my hand, this is a right wing feather. And so if you've got primaries, this leading edge of the feather here is going to be really short and compact. The trailing edge of this feather is going to be the bigger part. And if we put this on the right hand side, we'll see that that leading edge is towards the front. The big edge, or the bigger edge, is towards the back here. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and show you how to grind these things with just a rasp or a file. And then we're also going to use some sandpaper to finish it off. So I'm going to put this thing in my clamp here, and then I'm going to use a rasp just to take the heavy part of the quill off. And then we're going to finish it off with some sandpaper. So this is a new piece of 80 grit right here. So we're shooting for a nice even amount of quill, and that's pretty nice. That's pretty flat right there. So you'll notice that there's a big fat part and then a little skinny part back here. We're just going to take our razor knife and trim the edge of that off. Now when you're doing this, be very careful of your thumb. You will slice your thumb if you're holding the clamp like this and cutting towards it. Be careful doing that. A perfect fletching. You see how that made a little curl when I took it out of there? That's exactly what you want. That way you have it thin enough that when you glue it to the shaft, there's not a big bunch of quills sticking up. That's perfect. All right, so now let's just move out to the belt sander and I'll show you how I normally do these things. All right, so I've got all of my fletchings made. Now we're just going to start fletching some arrows. I'm not going to take you guys through the process of doing this. We'll cover that in a different series of videos. But I wanted to give you one more tip on these fletchings that you're going to be making, and that is the front edge of these things. When you get done with them, they're kind of blunt. And so I just take a pair of scissors or a razor knife and just kind of cut just a little bit of an angle on the front of that feather. That's going to make it a little bit more streamlined, so if you're shooting off the shelf or shooting off your knuckle, it's not going to be quite so apt to catch into those things and stick. But that's going to wrap up this video. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I'll try to answer them. But if you're not subscribed to the channel, go ahead and do that and have fun. We'll see you guys next time.